What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Beth Duke. We're talking about her book, Anywhen. That book is available now. So, this book is a dual timeline, but it's historical fiction, but also sci fi because the present setting is in the future. And it was just a really cool concept, really original, where it's, kind of if you're born in the year or if you're alive in the year 2100, but you have the ability to go back and meet one of your ancestors in the year 1970, let alone at Woodstock. That's the idea. Like, you would probably go, right? I don't know if I would go. I probably would. But that's kind of the premise of this book. So it was really cool to talk to Beth about her research that she did. She visited the sites of Woodstock. She visited New York and she talked to people who were there. And I just really enjoyed getting to know her thoughts on her research and just her experiences in general. And I think you guys will like it too. So without further ado, here is Beth Duke. So today we've got Beth Duke. We are talking about Anywhen. That book is available now. Beth, thank you so much for joining me today. I just finished this book yesterday. It's fresh in my brain. An easy read, a fun read, unique presence, like unique premise. And it was just like, it was so fun getting to know the characters and trying to figure out where it was going to go. I enjoyed it a lot and I appreciate, well, we'll dig a little bit deeper today.
Great. I'm just thrilled to be here, and I'm so happy that you just finished it. So it's probably fresher in your mind than it is mine, which is fabulous. That's great. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are you like you've got a couple projects since then where you're like, oh, okay, like gotta refresh yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody asks if I'm working on another book yet, and I tell everyone, I go through a phase after I finish a book where I swear I'm never going to write another book as long as I live. So I'm in that phase right now. It won't last, but that's where my brain is at the moment. But I also meet with a lot of book clubs about other books I've written, so I have to reshuffle and get into Anywhen mode, which it makes me really happy to get to discuss it with you.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah. No, that's fun. That's fun that you kind of like rehash and not just for your own, like you have some space and you can reflect on it, but then also get pick other people's brains about it. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So before we get started, can you give like a summary of the book so that people, if they haven't read it, they can follow along with the conversation?
Yeah, Anywhen is the story of a young woman named Basie, rhymes with Daisy, who was born in the year 2069 in a very utopian, futuristic society. And 2069 is the 100th anniversary of the Woodstock Music and Art Fair in 1969. And there's this overwhelming nostalgia for all things hippie and flower power and bell bottoms and for the music of the era. And her mom dresses as a hippie and wears flowers in her hair the whole time she's pregnant. And Maisie grows up with the knowledge that Woodstock was a really cool thing. And she also has a worshipful attitude about her great 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 grandmother who attended Woodstock and was also there for the very beginning, the dawn of artificial intelligence and research at MIT. So she gets an opportunity to time travel, and the place that's an absolute natural fit for her is to immediately decide to go to Woodstock. So she time travels to Woodstock and looks up this great 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 grandmother, Kelly, whom she's been just dying to meet. Things don't go exactly as she anticipates. She ends up falling in love with someone at the festival and has to make a lot of very difficult choices. But it's been called a front row seat to the most legendary music festival of all time. I did a tremendous amount of research, actually visited the site, did a lot of digging into Woodstock. I sometimes feel like I was there at this point. And I think it really transports people to that, which was a really important era in the United States. It was a time of great division and tumult, and the counterculture really showed what they were about and communicated to the world what they believed in through Woodstock, through the music, and through the gathering of almost 500,000 people. So I think it's a real cultural touchstone for us, and I love telling people about it. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what Anywhen is about.
Yeah, and I love it because it was such like it does. It's like you're touching on like the what if, and then you're touching on the what was, and making a connection with that, and also just like exploring it was like a time capsule for readers too. Like that was before my time. I was born in the late 80s. I don't even know if my parents were born in the 50s, so it's like they would have been like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years old when all that went down, which may so they it is in their history, in their generation, in their lifetime. But I just Woodstock was so iconic for the reasons that you just laid out, and it was just like it was like it was once in a lifetime thing, and it was almost like even if they try to repeat it, it's not going to be the
Well,
same.
no,
And because it was such like, well, you touched on these points too, where it was such a pivotal time in America where there was so much like unrest because of Vietnam and all that stuff. And one thing that I didn't realize until I've read other works was that like how much thousands of American men like just flew to Canada because either they didn't want to be drafted or they didn't believe in the war. And Canada was totally like, we get it. It's okay. And like, we've seen it. We've got a process for this.
yeah,
And I just thought it was like, there were so many layers to it. And I appreciated like how you roped all of that into this one woman's story of where she only knows one life. She doesn't know a controlled life, a very like emotionally controlled, a climate
yeah,
controlled life. And it's just there's no need. She's got anything she needs or wants. And then she just embarks on this journey to meeting your heroes. And then it's like a rude awakening. And it was just like such a fun ride. And there's just so much to be said about all of that. So I do want to piggyback into your research, like you said, like the research of it. And I think I did see images from like the back of the book when you like your author's note and stuff like that, where you visited the places and you were like you were in physically in the zone and all that stuff. So I want to explore like your research. Did you approach it the same way as your previous books, and anything that you surprising that you learned, stuff like that?
yeah, there were a lot of really big, surprising things I learned along the way. And I got more and more, it was a rabbit hole I went down, and I got more obsessed with what Woodstock was like every day because writing historical fiction is familiar to me. I've written books that take place in the 40s, but something this recent and something this monumental in U.S. history was really interesting to dive into. And there's all kind of cool stuff. Like I found out very early on that the promoters of Woodstock invited Roy Rogers to close the festival with Happy Trails, which I thought was the most bizarre thing. And of course, he said no. But when you think about it, it makes sense because the people Woodstock grew up with Roy Rogers and the cowboy thing and Dale Evans. There were all really cool things. One other celebrity story that I think is interesting is that this was the beginning of Carlos Santana's career. He was 22 years old. He had been playing in bars in Tijuana right before this festival. And before he went on, Jerry Garcia,
I love that.
yeah, Jerry Garcia gave him a hit of acid because he thought he was going to be going on hours later. And then they pushed Carlos Santana out onto the stage. And if you watch him playing during the song Soul Sacrifice, he has said in interviews numerous times that he thought his neck of his guitar was comprised of writhing snakes and he couldn't even look at it. And it was one of the best sets they've ever played. But
And he's still
yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. But another thing that was very interesting to me, I've interviewed a number of people who actually were attendees at Woodstock, and we all think of the stereotypical hippies, and that was absolutely not the case. You had 15, 16, 17, 19-year-old kids, many of whom had nothing to do with even marijuana, who just came for the music, came for the social significance of Woodstock. They were all like minded. They all wanted to be pro peace, an end to the war in Vietnam, and to make their voices heard. And they were very much unified in that. And I think that's a beautiful story as well. But it was very interesting to me to find out that the people I thought attended Woodstock, a lot of them were just high school kids that weren't necessarily like the hog farm with the hippie culture that showed up there. There was a different side to it, and people who never had anything to do with drugs at all while they were there. It was more a spirit of taking care of each other because they thought there were going to be 100, 150,000 people. Gates fell down, and all of a sudden you have almost 500,000 without enough food for them, with very adverse weather conditions, and people shared what they had and took care of each other. And I love that. You had 3 days of peace and love and sharing, and it was a really neat moment. Another thing I found really interesting about Woodstock.
It's just another thing like how unexpected that was.
Yeah,
Like anybody who was attending didn't really plan on it. Was just it was natural. It was organic. It was like everybody's there just peace and being helpful and looking out for one another. I just thought that was so fascinating how that just happened naturally for so many people that were there.
yeah, and there wasn't any any incidents of violence. There wasn't any real disruption throughout the whole thing. Another thing I thought was fascinating is you had these young people who were protesting the Vietnam War, who were advocating for peace, who were very suspicious of the U.S. government and U.S. military. But when they were starving because there wasn't enough food to go around, the United States military was flying in helicopters full of food. And the people surrounding that area in Bethel, New York, where the festival was held, didn't want the hippies there, wanted nothing to do with it, but they all got together and made sandwiches and shipped them in there for these kids who were hungry. And it just, everybody came together. And I think that's a beautiful moment in American history. I really do.
It was because it's like something as simple as making sandwiches. Yeah, what we just get an assembly line and we make a bunch of sandwiches for people who they need food and they're not. And I guess it was like, yeah, like people, the community who didn't want them there, but then maybe they realize like, okay, yeah, it's just the natural whatever's going to happen when there's like a huge large group of people in, like you said, adverse weather conditions. But really they weren't there to cause trouble. They were just there to enjoy themselves and to just exist and to enjoy the music and to enjoy the community, even as so diverse that community at that concert was, at that festival was. I thought that was like, and it's this thing where it's a shame where it's that, like I said, it's almost never going to be replicated again today. I can't imagine that ever being the case where the government will be like, oh, you know what, these are like concert goers in need and let's help them out. That's like unheard of. I feel like that would never happen. That would never happen today. And it's just like, so fascinating to me.
And they've tried to duplicate the conditions. They tried to do Woodstock in '99. That was terrible. It was a disaster. They've tried to do it again. And there are a lot of people who are dedicated to preserving the history of the festival. One of them is Dr. Neil Hitch at the museum at Bethel Woods, which is the Woodstock Museum, essentially. And they are collecting oral histories from people who attended it because these folks are in their 80s now. So we want to preserve their experiences. And
I know, right?
yeah, so they discovered so much about this love and peace. And of course, nobody remembers mud. They don't remember rain. They don't remember being hungry. They remember the peace and the unity and everybody getting along and what a magical moment it was. And I think a lot of them realized that after they were there. But they really left there feeling like they had made a difference. They had been heard. And I think they were heard, maybe not the way they wanted to be at first, but eventually they very much were. And it heralded in a new era of philanthropy and social services in this country that hadn't necessarily existed before. And that was that generation, the Woodstock generation. And I think there are some parallels to a divided country now and a divided country over the centuries in America. And I just think it's a beautiful moment when everybody comes together, and music is a unifying force. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, it really is. It's so crazy. And I loved how you name dropped a bunch of performers in there. Like you kept it relevant. We're like, no, this is the timeline that we're following. And I love Aerosmith. So it was really funny how you snuck Steven Tyler in there. Like just these little things, these little moments that you like snuck in there as they're navigating this 3-day thing. It really does. It's helps the reader, at least for me, just immerse myself and be like, follow along with the vibe.
I can't tell you how exciting it was for me to discover that Steven Tyler was there. I had no idea, and I just ran into that when I was doing research.
How did that, like, yeah, how did you find that
I had to
out?
go digging back into what he was doing at the time and what his band was called at the time and how long before they made Aerosmith. I think there's something in the book where he says to my character Jack something like, "You got to dream until your dream comes true." I don't think I'll get in trouble for that. I certainly hope he doesn't get mad that I said he smoked pot. Let's talk. I think that's okay. But that was really fun to get to throw him in, and he was.
I think there's worse things that are he's worried
Yeah,
about,
I
I
think
think,
so
you
too.
know.
Absolutely, yes.
That's hilarious. That's so funny. Yeah, no, I was excited because I'm like, I don't know, like I said, like my dad and my parents are they grew up in the 70s or in the 60s, I would say in the 70s. I was born in the late 80s, so they were already like 30-ish years old, almost 30. And so, but I know even this goes true with a lot of generations. Maybe some generations will grow up listening to what their parents' generations listen to just hearing it in the house or in the car in the radio. And that's why like I grew up like appreciating Aerosmith and appreciating the Beatles. And like with Santana, I had no idea that was Santana's like first like breakthrough. I love that because I just remember first hearing Santana. It was like you took the reader and like through the characters, how they were like, he was different. He was different than probably maybe what people would have expected, but people were still digging it. People were still digging his new sound and his new style. And I love that because it was like some of his songs and his guitar solos are like just so classic, and just the performances are just like something to be remembered. And that was a bit like nostalgic just for me, and like living vicariously through those experiences. And so that's really cool that you were like you had to do your digging and you had to figure it out, and then you also had to figure out how to put that on the page, you know.
If you're like me, I love reading historical fiction because I like to be entertained but learn stuff at the same time. So it was really fun to get to throw in some
Yep.
interesting facts. One of the things that came up when I was researching this too that I think is a fascinating aspect of this that I didn't think about before was that Woodstock, the 60s essentially, came on the heels of the 1950s, where you had post war America, where basically everyone had the American dream. They bought their houses, they had 2.2 children, a boy and a girl. It was extremely conservative. It was prosperity, it was the blessings of a great economy. And you had music like Frank Sinatra and whoever else was popular in the 50s. And then this huge cultural shift happened in the early 60s. You've got Elvis swiveling his hips all of a sudden. You've got rock and roll is starting.
Yep.
And it had to have been the most stunning thing to the parents who were watching this happen. And parents did what parents of teenagers always do, they freaked out. But I think that's probably one of the biggest shifts in
Yep.
cultural attitudes that this country has ever seen, going from the 50s to the 60s.
I love that because I remember reading about there were like networks who weren't sure about televising Elvis's performances. At least they had to do it from the waist up because they were worried about the scandal. And I love that because I also appreciate how far like music and performances and just how society's like reaction, because like it's a human thing, right? It's human behavior. Like we're curious about these things and we want to explore, we want to push the buttons, we want to push the limit. And there's nothing wrong with swiveling your hips to the rhythm, but it was just like, oh my god, pearl clutching,
Oh,
no.
yeah.
But then it fast forward, yeah. It's fast forward 50 years and it's, oh, Elvis swiveling his hips, that's not this. No, we're paying attention to the big picture. We're just like, no, that's not what we're focusing on. We're focusing on how his rhythm is matching his music and his performance. It's a whole thing. Like it's so funny how like how much that has shifted, but I appreciate it like all the same. I love it. I love it. It's so funny. So, like maybe switching gears, I think I've already okay. So there were some, as much as the supportive and the camaraderie, the whole theme of like camaraderie and stuff that was coming along with the Woodstock Festival. There's also some like sensitive stuff going on because I'm thinking like I can't imagine me and myself going and like just trusting this random stranger to watch my friends. You know what I mean? Like just some stuff like that. So how did you like navigate some of those tricky topics, like knowing how today's readers are aware of, with just inserting the realness of how things were back then, or just like the sensitive themes of, because it's like there's not many trigger warnings in there, but it's like there's some stuff that like maybe you have to be careful. I want to explore how maybe how to navigate that stuff and like previous experience, like previous real things that happened, and translating that for today's readers, stuff like that.
Yeah, I didn't feel like there were very many trigger warnings because it was such a more innocent time, even with the drug use and everything else that was going on in 1969. I think people were by and large much more trusting Sexual crimes, things of that nature, really weren't such a big thing. And I don't think it was that big a worry. Although there were certainly tons and tons of kids at Woodstock whose parents did not know they were there or had forbidden them to go there, and they went anyway. You had a lot of high school kids that sneaked out and went there. So
Yeah.
this book is actually probably the least of anything I've written in terms of trigger warnings and things to watch out for readers. I do think it was a much more innocent time, even in the 60s. I think some of that 50s attitude carried over a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's fun. Because yeah, I imagine how you touch on historical fiction because I do appreciate the historical fiction aspect of you're entertained, but you also feel like you're a little bit smarter when you're finished. And just like it gives you insight that not a lot of that you can't really get other than in reading historical accounts. But even if you read history, it doesn't take into account like the context of it necessarily, like the emotions or like the events, like the individual feelings, the individual experiences is like the collective. And so that's kind of like yeah, because you did touch on like the drugs and you did touch on maybe a little bit of like the brief love triangle and but the drugs, it was funny. It was especially when we see like our beloved Kelly, she as like I loved it. It was like I want to explore that, like how like putting her into this compromising situation of this logical, cold, just matter of fact, no nonsense person finding herself in like the opposite situation that she would ever be a part of, and just expanding her mind and painting the sky. I love that. I want to explore like how you like came up with her situation, how you explored her experience like that.
I really thought it would be fascinating to juxtapose Kelly's personality with Baisie's because there were such different. Baisie, even though she's from a very different environment, she's very much a bohemian kind of free spirit, and so was the majority of the population at Woodstock. But because she had a history in mathematics, because she was on the first stages of computer research, I felt like she would have a very, not staid, but very reserved personality. I think, honestly, if Kelly were in 2025, she might be referred to as neurodivergent. She was a little bit different. She reacted differently to a lot of situations. And I think that was an interesting juxtaposition with Baisie and her outgoing nature. So that was fun to write. And obviously, you take someone like that and plunk them down in Woodstock, which is just chaos. It was fun to explore very much. But her playing off Baisie and vice versa was very interesting, looking at the two different personalities. And everything I write and everything I've ever written as an author is women's fiction at its heart, which is an emotional transformation within a character due to external circumstances and a journey or an odyssey, if you will. And that certainly happened for Baisie, who is known as Sarah at the festival, but it also happened for Kelly. She was a very different person by the end of this book. And I loved seeing the transformation that she went through as well as what Baisie went through. And they helped each other get there, which I thought was really beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, 'cause it's almost I wouldn't say that I disliked Kelly. It was like I totally understood where she was coming from. I totally understood where because she knows one thing and she cares about this thing. She's very goal and career oriented, and then like her, she's growing up in a time where there's so much free spirited vibes going on, and she was just like no nonsense, and she was just like, okay, no, I'm not interested in that. But then her coworker, no, come on, and
Yeah,
then she does, and then she's just fine, I'll be there, but I'm not. She wasn't embracing it until she did, and I feel like yeah, there's something to be said about throwing your characters. I love it when authors throw their characters into, they just put them in uncomfortable situations, characters who are so sure of themselves and who are so confident, and then authors who just throw them into a situation where they're just out of their element. And they're not familiar with the situation. They don't know how to like, and they're usually coping mechanisms or skills or personality traits just don't work. I love that. I love
I,
when authors do that. I love like watching Kelly do that.
I
Yeah.
that too. And it's the ultimate outsider story when you have this woman from the future who's from this incredibly sophisticated society, very advanced. She knows everything. She knows everything she wants to know. But you put her at Woodstock, and all of a sudden she's mangling every idiom, every expression. She doesn't know how to act around anyone. And I think that's one reason the book works. I had people tell me they think that her naivete and lack of understanding of where she was, even though she was so sophisticated, is really a great part of the story. And then Kelly, in addition to the fact that Kelly was so hyper competent, I loved looking at what her work environment was like, because I honestly think a lot of women now don't understand what it was like for women in the 60s and 70s, particularly in an area, a field, anywhere in STEM, but certainly in early computer science. She had to put up with this boss who was saying, you can't be the director, you can't be in charge, you're going to go off and have children, we can't have that. And that was legit what it was like for women then. So that was very interesting to me. And I loved.
And that would not fly today.
No,
Yeah.
no way. But it was like that. It really was. There was a time when women couldn't own property or have a credit card in their name or anything else in this country. And we're not that far removed from that now. So that was really interesting.
I know. Even speaking about like public opinion today, veering off on that, it's like when I see so much like of the public opinion, especially from men and even today's women who are like embracing and defending that role, that traditional role. And it's, girl, like you're allowed to get a credit card in your name because of things that the women in the past have fought for.
Yeah.
If are you comfortable going back to that? And it's no, absolutely not. And it's just I've trust me, and it's so crazy because it was like you're absolutely right. It was like just the 70s when women were allowed to get their own property and not when things were breaking away from women depending on a man to be self-sufficient. It was like the system that was built to where a woman couldn't sustain herself. And it's now there's so much conversation going around where like with men who are upset that women want to be single, like women are like they're complaining that women are just single and they're happy about it. Yeah, because we don't if you're not going to enrich our lives, we don't need you. We're happy by ourselves. We're sustain we got our entertainment, we've got our friendships, and we've got anything else that we need out of ourselves. And if you're not adding to that, we're not interested. And that's totally fair. And it's like men are unfortunately not they're not responding well to that. And it's just dude, up and stop complaining because you're telling on yourself. And it's just there's a conversation like that I love, and there's also a conversation where it's like trying to just speak to other women and be like, no, the reason that you have the freedom to choose between traditional and non-traditional, the reason that you're choosing that you enjoy it because you're not being forced into it is because of women like the trailblazers like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Steinem. There's just like all these women activists out there who have been fighting and fighting so that yes, you have the choice. You're enjoying it and you're fighting for it because you chose that versus you're being forced into that. And I love that. I love that juxtaposition where, yeah, like Kelly, she was struggling with that. And it was just like to put that commentary in there to be like, no, this is real. And men felt fine expressing that in words.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's going to follow, nobody's going to listen to you. Nobody wants you as a boss, and you're going to go off and marry and have children. So we can't have you continuing this work. What? But that was the reality of it.
And it's unimaginable to us now. Now that's a lawsuit. So thank God we are where we are, because it was really and truly like that. And it was important to me to get that across and how much things have changed. So that, thank goodness it's historical fiction now. It's like in the past. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. I want to explore maybe a little bit of the love triangle because it's like I liked Jack, and he was just like he cared for her, but it was just like the slow burn. What do they call it? The slow burn
Yeah.
between Jack and Sarah, and then it was like, but I also felt for Kelly, but then it was also as a reader, I was listening and paying attention to Sarah because she knew things
Yeah.
and she was playing on her knowledge, but also being very delicate about the knowledge that she knew. And then once things start playing out, it was just like, oh, and it was just like, it was kind of like playing with that timeline. And you're approaching the threshold of not only playing with people's emotions or like navigating characters' emotions, but then navigating their trajectory as well. And so I kind of want to explore how you navigated that, how you came up with that, where the story took you, where your characters told your characters told you to do, stuff like that.
Yeah, I have to be so careful not to give things away because there is a pretty big twist in there, and I don't want to reveal anything about that. I loved the forbidden nature of Kelly and Jack's relationship. I loved that she couldn't allow herself to fall in love with him and vice versa, and they were in a position where they really couldn't have that happen. So that made it more interesting to me as a writer and as a reader. But it, like you're talking about, it very much unfolded at the keyboard that they were going to get together. I knew that they would be drawn to each other and that she was carrying knowledge that was going to be a real impediment to their relationship. So I, without giving too much away, I really loved that aspect of it. And I loved Jack as a character. I thought he was just absolutely great looking, great guy. And I wanted to cheer for him and I wanted everything to go right for him. And it was just really fun to write.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, because he was just like has this looming responsibility, like looming thing over his head where he knows he's possibly likely going to get drafted, and he's not he's making plans, he's taking steps to not have that be his life. And that says a lot about this is his last kind of hoorah, this is his last kind of chance to just be with his friends and enjoy himself and enjoy once in a lifetime experience. And then, oh surprise, he ends up meeting this woman that has a hold over him. And I felt for him and I felt for his journey, and I was like, oh, like readers we're led to think that it's gonna go one way, and then it's, oh, okay, let's see what let's see where this is gonna go.
Yeah, if you're like me, I love a twist. I have to have a really good twist at some point in every book I read. So I loved making that a little bit twisty, turny. We got into it. And Kelly, as
Yeah,
part of that love,
yeah, I know.
we all have sympathy for Kelly and how she felt. And it was very difficult for her to express her emotions. And I can't say too much about how things worked out. I'm one of these people that goes through life with a very optimistic attitude, and I feel like everything turns out the way it's supposed to in the end, no matter how horrible it looks up front. I really believe that, and that we all impact each other without even knowing we've done so in a good way. So that's something that kind of is a thread that's woven through every book I write. And I feel like that's true in this book for sure.
That's a healthy outlook too, because it's like when you go through big changes in your life or you put your characters through big changes, it's not like you just have to, like, yeah, this is gonna suck. This is gonna suck. Just deal with it, because it's not gonna suck forever, and you never know what's gonna happen
Yeah.
in a couple weeks or in a month or whatever. Like, you never know what's next for you. That's all we have. Like, the more healthy way to look at it is that, yeah, this sucks, and just let it suck and just do your best to handle it and then go from there.
You get through it and see what's on the other side. And it's 5 year rule. Let's see how this looks and how much this matters in 5 years from now, because things are going to be very different. So I like to look at it that way and examine that as a concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the reasons I wrote this book, and I don't know if we're,
Absolutely.
but I, for many years now, have been meeting with book clubs regularly. I wrote a book in 2018 called It All Comes Back to You, which was like hugely popular with book clubs all over the country and in Canada. And it's been translated for European distribution. I've actually met with people overseas about it. So I really got into this book club.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah, and I love these women. I have met so many wonderful women, smart, funny, intelligent, fun women all over the country. So one of the things I set out to do with this was make a book that would be fun for meetings, for bell bottoms and daisy headbands and pineapple upside down cake and stuff like that was incorporated into the book that I'm hoping will make for really fun book club meetings, because book club women are the best as far as I'm concerned. So I give back to them, dedicated to them. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you do introduce like a lot of conversational topics. For sure.
Definitely. You have Basie in this futuristic
No,
society.
that was my dog.
Oh, I'm sorry. I loved the concept of Daisy.
No, that's okay. That's why she found my treat and she was like, yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I wanted to introduce some topics that would truly be controversial to talk about. And you have her in this futuristic society in which she introduces in the first chapter that they have eliminated racism because everyone is the same race. They've eliminated hunger because everyone is fed the same thing every day. And there are all these aspects of this futuristic society that she sees as having fulfilled what the Woodstock generation dreamed of: absolute peace, harmony, no strife. And it's interesting to talk to book clubs about, particularly the racial thing. Would we be better off if we were all the same, if we all looked the same, if all of our traits were blended into the very best of each of us? Which I have very strong feelings about that. I think maintaining our individuality is a wonderful thing, but there are others who don't necessarily lean that way. So introducing topics like that, along with all of the controversy of the 1960s, I think makes for really interesting things to talk about. And of course, Basie comes from this society that.
Yeah, oh no, I was just gonna say that it's really interesting because Basie's society eliminated racism because everybody looks the same, but that's arguably what racists wanted. It was just like they so what was it? So many of Hitler's like Nazism was we eliminate the lesser thans, and so the society can focus on advancing humanity, humans. And it's like if you guys just ignored that, you could have been advancing society this whole time without worrying about something as trivial as skin color or religion or whatever, and or disabilities or whatever. And so I thought that was such an interesting thing because, okay, is it a utopia or unity? Is it really like we don't want, we don't, but because you guys don't know, because you guys don't know any better, you don't know anything different, so you're not introduced to those things that made it so controversial. And so I thought that was like it was also something to think about as well.
It was. And how boring would life be if we were all the same? If we all had the same interest, if we all did the same thing every day, if we all had the same. It just, to me, I thought was a very interesting way to look at it. And of course, you can look at Hitler, you can look at eugenics, you can look at all the horrible experiments that have taken place over the years, but that wasn't my intention. I was talking about scientists who basically wanted to take the best of each segment of the population and their genetic strengths and put them all together into what you might want to refer to as a superhuman. But it eliminates the strife and the struggle. And I'm not in favor of it, but it was interesting to me to take a look at what it was like in Basie's time. I love controversy.
Yeah, because yeah. It makes for good storytelling, and it makes for like some juicy bits of your story. It's just like going back to what can we throw at our characters? How can we create this divisiveness and see what the characters, how they come out of it?
Yeah, and that's all part of the book club thing. I've had book clubs tell me they sat and argued for 2 hours over all of this that took place in the future and what took place at Woodstock. So that makes me really happy. That's built in for book club discussion. When I lived in Florida, which was the majority of my life, I was in a book club, which is the thing I miss most about Florida other than my family. And I love that. I love having something that you can dissect and argue about and feel differently about and represent your point of view. So that's really where I was trying to go with that.
In a mature way, right?
Yeah.
Not so much, oh, you're wrong and you're a horrible person for thinking this way. And it's, just exploring it into a respectable manner of it. Just be like, oh no, I didn't like this. I didn't like that. Well, that's okay.
Respectful discussion. I will listen to anyone's point of view. It doesn't have to be my own, as long as it's respectful. And I think we learn a lot from each other that way. Everyone brings something to the table. Everyone has a perspective. And fiction is an empathy engine. It puts you in other people's shoes, and I think that's a fascinating aspect of it.
I know. I think that's a lot of what people may not realize is, like there's There's just so many possibilities, and there's millions of, as cliche as it is, it's like there's millions of stories to tell, and there's a million ways to tell it. And it's just, World War II from America is going to be different than World War II from Europe. And it's like that in and of itself is going to be such a different like contrast. And it's so fascinating. And it's just, there's no harm in hearing everybody out and to like exploring all these different types of storytelling and all these different stories and all that jazz.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We all have our own perspective that we bring to everything, and it's a good thing to sit and listen to other people and how they feel about things that they may see completely differently than you do. And that's at the heart of a lot of book clubs. At least
Yeah,
I've been to. Yeah, definitely.
100%. So, what were the most challenging parts to write? What were the most enjoyable parts to write?
I loved writing Sarah and Jack finding each other and falling in love at the festival. I loved writing Sarah mangling expressions like "I'm falling for you" became, I think, on you, things like that. That was a really fun part of the book for me to write. And I try to put a little humor in everything I write because I think that's great. You need a little comic relief. So Sarah definitely provided my comic relief with her misunderstandings of American idioms and phrases and slang. So that was a lot of fun. I can't really talk too much about the hardest part of the book to write because it would be a spoiler. But there was certainly a separation involved and a lot of pain and a lot of anguish, and that was difficult to write for sure. But I'll give too much away if I go into it too much.
Yeah, that was like definitely a turning point in this story where it was like, oh no. I was like, no.
Yeah, that was really hard to write. That was difficult.
It's like, yeah. Yeah, and it's just when you follow these character journeys, and then when stuff like that happens, you're just like, you're like, no, it can't be it. That can't be it.
Yes,
Okay, so let's see. What do you hope readers get out of Anywhen?
I hope people walk away with an understanding of what the 1960s in the United States were like and how powerful unity and the message of unity is in our society today as it was in 1969. I hope that they're entertained and amused by Woodstock in 1969 and want to learn more about it and what happened then, because I really do think it's a cultural touchstone that's still relevant now and will continue to be for a long time. I certainly hope people are amused by it and find it funny, but also are very involved emotionally with the characters and invested in them and find them memorable. That's always my hope with any book that I write. And the overarching thing that I mentioned earlier is that I want this book to be special to book clubs. I want them to take it and dissect it and have fun with the controversial topics in it and the emotional journey of all the characters, but also have fun with flowered headbands and bell bottoms and 60s food. So I think it could make for fun book club meetings, and that's really the intent behind the whole thing. So those are the major things. I also, as you and I talked about earlier, the topics that we've touched on, I want people to understand what it was like for women in the 1960s in the professional marketplace. I want people to understand how things have changed and how far we've come, and maybe contrast the way things were in 1969 with how they are now and how they could be in 2101, where Basie goes back to. I think we are on a road that is very interesting in terms of artificial intelligence. One of the first people I heard from who read this book worked his entire career in computers, and particularly with a concentration on artificial intelligence. And he told me that it was so refreshing to read something where there's a positive look at AI and its influence on the future and having it harnessed to make people's lives better, as opposed to the dystopian, horrible, terrifying scenes that we have seen displayed with AI. So I'm very hopeful. I think I'm one of those definitely glass half full types who believes that AI is going to be a great blessing in our lives. But the technology is growing by such leaps and bounds so quickly that we're going to see a very different society in 20 years from now. I really think we're going to have a huge impact. And I think it's going to be a good one. I depend on Alexa to do everything. I'm sorry I said her name out loud now. But we depend on so many of these odd things. And it's so primitive at this point that 20 years from now, it's going to be a very different scenario. And I'm very sanguine about it. I think it's going to be a great thing for society.
Yeah, I think that's also for me personally, I'm a little bit terrified of AI and its capabilities just because there it's like I feel like a healthy skepticism about it because you never know what people will do with it. And it's we should this like this something cool that our day and age has a hold of, and there's so many. It's like the possibility, like the world is our oyster, right? With AI, and it's just like as much as it could potentially be used to like manipulate people, it should equally be used to like detect diseases better than humans.
Exactly.
Like just for science, simulations that will actually help predict things or help people better than like AI art is one thing, but no, like I want AI to be able to look at stats and predict something about my health before a doctor can. So it's like stuff like that. That's when that would be so useful and so helpful. And also just the idea of helping people like in our day and age or 20 years from now, like you said, experience things that we might not have had access to,
And that's how I
you know?
feel. And there's certainly a very particular perspective for me as a writer. And there's a very particular perspective of any artist because it's pretty terrifying what AI can do. I don't think there's going to be a replacement for the human mind, but it's stunning what AI can accomplish. But I would love to see it like you were talking about, harnessed for the betterment of mankind, for medicine, for all sorts of advances that we could make. And it's all going to be a matter of who shepherds this and who stewards it for the future. And it's going to have to be controlled by
Yeah.
people, definitely. But I don't see things in a dystopian way at all. I don't see things like they did in 2001 A Space Odyssey. Isn't it freaky to think there was a movie called 2001 A Space Odyssey when there's a computer that takes over?
And we're like 20 a quarter century later and we're like, ooh.
Yeah. But I just think we're going good places with it. And I need to believe that for my children and my children's children. And I think that we can make a great future with artificial intelligence. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much potential there, and as long as like we all are like you're hoping that like you said the people who are facilitating it are have that great future in mind and not just like personal gain or personal messing around with it. It's just it could be great. It could help and it could be
It
great.
could be.
We don't need to go into Terminator territory.
We could extend lifespans for so long. There are so many wonderful things we could do with that kind of knowledge and the power to generate more. So I'm very hopeful. Like I said, I'm very sanguine about it.
Yeah, no, that's a healthy outlook, and I love that. I love that for someone who like you who have done familiarized yourself enough with it, and you're like, no, like we gotta be optimistic. We gotta look at the positive. We gotta look at the possibilities. That's such a healthy outlook. Let's see here. I'm gonna throw this at you. What advice do you have for Kelly? What advice do you have for Basie? What advice do you have for Jack?
Oh my goodness. I did not anticipate that. For Kelly, obviously take yourself less seriously. You're going to be fine, and stop interpreting everything in your life so literally and so stressfully. Advice for Basie: follow your heart. I think that's what she did, and I love that she did. So I would say that. For Jack, I think Jack did everything right. I'm a little in love with Jack. Like every male character I write like him, he's my hero. And I just loved him. I think he did everything right. There were a lot of young men who made that choice to go to Canada. There were a lot of young men who were on the verge of going to Canada. I think he did what he had to do. It explains in the book that his brother had been severely messed up for the rest of his life from his service overseas. But it's interesting to look at because I have people in my family, people I love dearly, who fought in Vietnam and who served very honorably there. I have very close friends who did as well, one of whom I enlisted to help me in writing this book. David Boyd is the name that I use. That's David's a real guy, and he served during the Vietnam War, and he allowed me to use his words and his attitude about it post-service when he came back. It was such a controversial topic, and I would never want to offend anyone or diminish the honor that we should give them. But it was such a controversial thing, primarily because of the draft, primarily because so many people were placed there against their will. And I think Jack made the right choice for Jack. I think he was worried about his parents and his family and what they would endure if he were sent overseas.
Yeah, and I'm totally sympathetic to that as well. It's kind of whatever. I can't imagine myself in that era of the context of the society how it was back then in real time. But it's like looking back at it, what if I were here now, or because I got two little boys, if there were ever a chance, because like I felt for his mom too, who was like supporting of him
Yeah.
dodging, and who she was like, because she's dealing with a son and saw what it did to him. And then so I don't think you're disrespectful or disgraceful for her doing this for yourself. I would rather have limited contact with you than have you here messed up. It's just, it like, and I totally felt for that. So I'm like, I don't think, because he's not the only one. That was such a common scenario for so many men
Yeah.
during that time where they were, because other books and other interviews that I've done where it's like there are still thousands of people, Americans, draft dodgers living in Canada still today, or who their children, they just started new lives, they started new families because that's where they fled to. And that's, it's still, and it could even be underreported, right? It's not disgraceful in my opinion anyway. And that's just from me.
Okay, we're talking about the Vietnam draft. You're a mom, I'm a mom. I have very strong feelings about how I would react in that situation. But my entire life, I have wondered what it would be like to be a high school kid with my boyfriend or my cousin or my guys I went to high school with who are my buddies going off against their will and possibly coming back in a body bag. And I've been fascinated by that concept. So this allowed me to explore that, and I can't imagine what those times were like. So I think this was cathartic for me in that way to just try to live what they lived through and experience what they experienced. And another thing I thought was interesting, you mentioned the mom getting involved in that. There really was advice in the Ladies' Home Journal for how to help your son avoid the draft, which I find that absolutely fascinating. That was in a ladies' magazine. Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah, because I bet that's so many mothers and women were looking outward to like how, like looking for guidance and looking for like how to handle these emotions in these situations that they had no control over. And just going back to, for the cynical way of looking at it, they were used to not having control over things, but then there was like this thing is like that these are your babies, and your babies are supposed to be the ones that you do have control over, that you are in charge of, and now all of a sudden you don't. And then that, like how you said, there's a possibility of them not making it back, and if they do, they're not the same, either alive or in a body bag, like you said. And that's so terrifying. That's so crazy. Like that's how much of a huge cultural moment this situation was.
Yeah, it's just really hard to put myself in those shoes. I can't imagine as a mom being faced with that kind of a situation for my son. It's absolutely terrifying.
Like I'm like my oldest, he's in second grade, and I had an issue with him walking to school by himself, which is a 5-minute walk. It's literally, I can hear the school bell from my backyard. It's like not, but he wanted his independence and he was like, Mom, I don't need you to walk. I can do this by myself. And I'm like, okay. Like, I just, and it's just like, I do trust him. And I want to believe that it's safe, but I'm also like, it's just like the block and a half, you never know
Anything could happen.
there are other kids who are doing the same thing.
Yeah. No, that's being a mom.
There's very little that you can do to prepare for it. You could prepare all you want, but real life situations, like we all have no idea.
No, and I think maybe that's at the core of this book too. You get to the point where, oh, I can't really say that without giving anything away, but there is a quote in there about a mom breaking her own heart to repair her child's heart with the pieces. And I really feel like that's a very much mom thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote that quote down as like when I was like writing my notes and about the story, and that was definitely one of the quotes that I wrote down. In addition to, let me see, that was one of them, and then it was also, let me see here, it was, oh, like about forgiveness. Like forgiveness takes us back to the people that we were. We could start over, and I'm like, that is so powerful. That is so powerful because that was a huge part of their story. Was like it was such like mismanaged expectations and communication, and it was just like neither of them, I guess Kelly, she handled it poorly, but it was like we can't really blame her because she's, who are you? I don't believe you, and this is Woodstock, you're probably on drugs. And it was just like, and then you're the man that I had feelings for is paying attention to you. And so it explains her behavior. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but explains her behavior. And then like you can't really blame Sarah for anything that she was doing. And so that was also such a powerful quote where it's just like forgiveness is such a huge part of the story, how they can like find themselves back to the possibilities of what could have been and what should have been between two women who are part of the same family line.
Yeah. I am again afraid of giving too many spoilers, but that was very important to me, the forgiveness in the book and the line about how it's essentially a form of time travel. We can reset and start over. And I think that's an important message for everyone. It really is. My husband and I went to Banff. I had to do research, which is, let me tell you, Banff, Canada is one of the most beautiful places I have ever visited in my life. I highly recommend it to anyone, and we just had the best time there. And it was absolutely necessary for the construction of this book to visit Banff. It's a beautiful place, and I'm really glad that's where they ended.
Bam. Is that like almost because I've been like to Niagara Falls, and that was like my touristy Canada trip. Is that like north or northwest of
Way far west,
Niagara Falls, Banff?
way on the other side of the country,
Okay.
in the
The
Canadian
whole other
Rockies,
side of the
essentially.
country.
Very dramatic mountain scenery. It's really beautiful.
Oh man, I love that. I love the idea of waking up and then you're just like in
It's
a
a big
majestic
country.
landscape. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love
it's
that. I know.
very beautiful.
Because I like we just. I would love to revisit because even as touristy as Niagara Falls was, it was still so much fun, and it was still like, and we did it before we had kids. So like now that we have like small children, I was just like, I'm just like, okay, we got to get them their passports. Then we can like do quick like drives ups and drive downs and just explore things. And they're getting a little bit older. They're 4 and 7 now, so they're getting a little older to the point where yeah, we want to maybe include them on some of these trips. And
Oh,
because I don't want to spend so much time and energy taking them places where it's not going to be core memory, or they're not going to appreciate it. But I'm not. Yeah, they're getting to that age where we could toy with that. We could toy with that.
that would be fabulous. I highly recommend it. And like you said, they will be core memories at this point, especially getting out in nature and just different scenery. And the I'm all about national parks and places in Canada that where you can really get back to nature. I think it's a great thing to do with your kids. It's certainly something we did when mine were little, and they remember.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Well, my husband, he's an Eagle Scout, so that's his jam. He like knows he has a whole system for camping. But I'll do it. Like I'll go along with it. But if I had a choice, I would go do a little cabin.
Mm-mm.
I would do cabin, like maybe glamping, like kind of semi glamping, but where we could still, yeah, you walk outside and you still enjoy roughing it a little bit. But like sleeping in a tent, I'm like, I feel like I've done enough of that where I'm like,
No,
I'm
I
okay.
don't do tents. I do not do tents. We did a cabin in Yellowstone. That's about as primitive of as I've ever gotten. I don't think I could do tents. Definitely not. But an Eagle Scout, he can take care of you under any circumstances.
He does. He has all these, like, he's got a whole system. He's, oh no, I'm gonna get some like pots and pans from the dollar store so we can use it for camping. We don't have to take our nice stuff. Or he's got like his whole tent and he's got like a tables and he's got like his outdoor 3 burner stove and grill and like he could like travel with. We put a hitch on my SUV so that we could take the extra big tent, big like over. Let's like a family tent, but then also the outdoor like overhang and like he's got a whole system where I'm like that's great. If I were not with you, I don't know if I would be missing out on anything. I'm just kind of I will go along with it because this makes you happy and like you're excited about it and I think it's important for the kids to experience this. But I'm like next time we go, I don't think I would mind paying a little extra for not having to do that. Like I was just,
Let's find a Hilton.
there's other ways to enjoy nature.
Yes, I understand.
Yep.
My husband's like that. We had a friend in Florida who used to say that if you break down on the side of the road, my husband would have something roasting on a spit on the side of the road within the first 5 minutes. He's that kind of guy. So I totally get it.
Yeah, it was like like the healthy with the mountain view, right? It was like go like
Yeah,
balcony, mountain view, and then you can wave to your friend in the parking lot and just be
definitely.
bro, like we're all part of this trip. Okay, Beth Duke, I think I don't know if I asked you this. Where can we find you online and on social media?
You will find me all over Facebook. I can't accept any more friend requests, but I'm always thrilled to have more followers. I post a ton of content on Facebook. I'm trying to post more content on Instagram, and my account on Instagram is only the Beth for you because I am ridiculous when it comes to puns. So it's only the Beth for you. There's also my public relations PR book publicist has a separate account that's Beth Duke author, and you can follow her account as well. I'm a little tiny bit on TikTok, but nobody knows I'm there. And that's mostly it. Obviously, my website, bethduke.com, is a great place to find basically everything you ever wanted to know about me or my books. I am always thrilled to hear from readers. If they want to email, there's certainly all the information that you need there on the website. So that's mainly where I am.
Perfect, perfect. Beth Duke, Anywhen. That book is available now. Thank you so much for speaking to me and for diving deep into all these random topics concerning Woodstock in the future and women's rights and everything in between. And if and when you release your next book or you're ready to talk about another topic or another title, feel free to reach out. Love to chat again. And there you go. That was Beth Duke talking about Anywhen. That book is available now. Check out the show notes where you can find links to find Beth online and on social media, where you could purchase the book. While you're at it, please find and follow and rate and subscribe to Cantina Book Club, YouTube, your favorite podcast player. I'm building the YouTube channel and I'm also working on some fun stuff with Patreon. So as for as little as $1 a month, you can support Cantina Book Club and help me out. If you need book recommendations, check out cantinabookclub.com. If you're looking for ways to support your favorite author, go on Goodreads and Amazon and give them a rating and review. It really does help them out, along with pre-orders and just ordering their book, because then they're likely to get more deals and also write more work for you. But also feel free to reach out to me if you need any recommendations. I'm always happy to give you personalized recommendations based on your genre, based on your reading, preferences, all that good stuff. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.